This is a story that challenges everything we know about medicine, probability, and the limits of human faith. Sarah and Mark spent 10 years fighting the deafening silence in their home. The best specialists in Boston gave them a final verdict: 0% chance. Absolute, irreversible infertility. But what happened after a trip to an ancient stone house in Turkey left even the most skeptical doctors speechless. Prepare to witness a miracle that began with a simple blue ribbon and ended with an event that science still cannot explain. Before we continue, leave a comment and let me know how long you or your loved ones have waited for your most cherished wish. It is important for me to see that hope is alive in every corner of the world. Boston in November is a specific state of mind. Gray, piercing rain drums against the windows as if reminding you that another year is coming to an end. For Sarah, a 38-year-old elementary school teacher, this rain sounded like a sentence. In their beautiful 2-story house, there was one door that always remained closed. The room at the end of the hall. 7 years ago, they painted the walls a soft yellow. They bought a crib made of natural oak. They hung a mobile with plush teddy bears. Back then, they were full of confidence. It is a matter of a few months, they told their friends. Now that room had turned into a museum of unfulfilled hopes. The crib was covered in a layer of dust, boxes of unpacked things piled up in the corner. You know that feeling when it physically hurts to look at empty things? When the silence in the house becomes so loud it hurts your ears? Sarah only went in there when Mark was not home. She would sit in the rocking chair, which had never creaked under the weight of a mother with a child, and just stare at the empty crib. She did not cry. There were no tears left. Inside, there was only a dry, scorched desert. On Tuesday morning, they had an appointment they had been putting off for 6 months. Dr. Stevenson was considered a luminary of reproductive medicine in Massachusetts. If anyone could perform a miracle, it was him. His clinic smelled of expensive antiseptic, fresh magazines, and barely perceptible fear. Mark, a 40-year-old architect, a man of numbers and blueprints, held Sarah's hand. His palm was warm, but Sarah felt his fingers trembling slightly. He loved her. God, how much he loved her. But Sarah saw how, over these 10 years, the waiting had sucked the life out of his eyes. Dr. Stevenson entered the office without smiling. In his hands was a thick folder with the results of the latest tests. He sat down, took off his glasses, and wiped them with the edge of his coat, a gesture that meant only one thing. "Sarah, Mark," he began in a voice devoid of emotion, "I will be completely honest with you." He turned the images on the glowing screen. "We have tried everything: 3 rounds of IVF, hormone therapy, experimental methods." He paused for what seemed like an eternity. "There are no more resources. The ovaries are completely depleted. The follicular reserve is 0. Sarah felt the room begin to shrink. "But maybe one more try," she whispered. Dr. Stevenson shook his head, firmly but with professional sympathy. "Sarah, your body has said stop. To continue is simply to torture you and waste your money. Medically speaking, there is no chance. 0%. The words fell onto the table heavy as stones. No maybes. No let's try in a year. The end. The drive home passed in silence, only the rhythmic sound of the wipers on the windshield. Swish, swish. Swish, swish. Sarah looked at the blurred city lights, feeling the last spark she had held onto all these years die inside her. Mark turned into the driveway, killed the engine, but did not get out of the car. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "Enough, Sarah," he said quietly. She turned to him. "What?" "I can't watch this kill you anymore," his voice broke. "I can't watch you die a little bit inside every month. We will sell the crib. We will turn that room into an office or a guest room. We will live for ourselves." It was the voice of reason, the voice of a loving husband who wants to stop the pain, but to Sarah it sounded like betrayal. "You want to give up? "I want my wife back," Mark shouted, and for the first time in years, Sarah saw tears in his eyes. "I want us to stop living in anticipation of something that will never happen." The doctor was clear. It is impossible. Sarah turned away to the window. He was right. Logic, science, medicine, everything was on his side. She should have agreed. She should have let go. But at that moment, watching the raindrops, she remembered a documentary she had glimpsed a couple of weeks ago about an old stone house on a mountain in Turkey, about a place people come to when they have nothing left but despair. Sarah took a deep breath. "Okay, Mark, we will sell everything. We will close this chapter forever." Mark exhaled, his shoulders dropping. "Thank you, honey. But I have one request," she interrupted. "One last condition." Mark tensed. "What is it?" Sarah looked him straight in the eyes. There was no madness in her gaze, only a quiet, frightening determination. "Take me away from here, not to doctors, not to clinics. Take me to Ephesus. I want to see the house of Mary. To Turkey?" Mark frowned. "Sarah, you are not religious." "Why?" To say goodbye, she lied. Or maybe she told the truth. "I want to tie a ribbon to that wishing tree and leave my dream there. If you do this for me, I promise I will accept our life as it is." Mark looked at her for a long minute. He saw it wasn't a whim. It was the plea of a person standing on the edge. "Okay," he nodded. "We will fly." Sarah leaned back in her seat. She didn't know that this decision would set off a chain of events that would turn their lives upside down. She didn't know that in her dresser drawer lay a blue satin ribbon from her wedding bouquet. And she certainly didn't know that this ribbon would soon become the only thread connecting her to a miracle. If Boston was gray and cold, Turkey greeted them with a wall of scorching air. July in Ephesus is not just heat. It is a sun that melts asphalt and thoughts. The temperature was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The air was thick, smelling of dry pine needles, dust, and thousands of years of history. The taxi crawled slowly up the winding road to Bulbul Dagi, Nightingale Mountain. Mark sat in the back seat, wiping sweat from his forehead. He felt out of place. The architect in him saw only old masonry and tourist infrastructure. The skeptic in him saw a waste of time and money. "Sarah, are you sure you want to go there in this heat?" he asked, looking at the line of buses with pilgrims. "Please, Mark, we are already here." They got out of the car. The noise of the cicadas was deafening. Walking up the paved path to the small stone house, Sarah felt a strange shift. The noise of the crowd, the laughter of tourists, the clicking of cameras, it all seemed to stay behind an invisible barrier. Here, at the entrance to Mariam Ana Evi, silence reigned. Not empty, but dense, filled. Inside the house it was dark and cool. It smelled of melted wax. Sarah walked past the altar. She didn't know the prayers. She wasn't a religious fanatic. She was just a woman with a hole the size of the universe inside her. They exited through the back door to the famous wishing wall. Thousands, tens of thousands of white paper napkins, cloths, and ribbons were tied to metal grates and tree branches. Every knot was someone's pain, someone's hope. Mark stayed to the side, arms crossed. He didn't want to participate in this superstition, but he respected her need to do it. Sarah walked over to an old olive tree a little away from the main crowd. Her hand dipped into the pocket of her linen trousers and pulled it out. The blue satin ribbon. It wasn't just fabric. She had taken this ribbon off her wedding bouquet 12 years ago. She had kept it in a box, dreaming of one day tying it around an envelope with a baby at discharge. That didn't happen. And now she was giving the ribbon to the tree. Sarah pressed the silky fabric to her lips. She didn't write a note like the others. Words weren't needed. "I am empty," she whispered, and a hot tear fell onto the dusty ground. "I am completely empty. If you can hear me, just fill me with life. At any cost." She tied the knot, tightly. A double knot so the wind wouldn't carry it away. The blue ribbon stood out brightly against the gray bark and white papers. "Goodbye," Sarah said to her dream. Mark came up from behind and put a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go to the hotel. You need to rest." Sarah nodded. She felt a strange emptiness, but also a lightness, as if the weight she had been dragging for 10 years was left hanging on that branch. The hotel in Kusadasi was luxurious, overlooking the Aegean Sea. Fatigue hit them like a concrete slab. They fell asleep early, without even eating dinner. The windows were tightly closed, the air conditioner humming quietly in the corner. That was when Sarah had the dream. It wasn't like ordinary dreams, blurry and chaotic. This one was hyper-realistic. Every detail was sharp, like in 4K resolution. She was standing in that garden by the stone house again. But there was no crowd. It was night. Moonlight flooded the olive trees with silver. A woman approached her. Sarah couldn't see her face. It was hidden by a simple veil, woven as if from light itself. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She felt peace, absolute maternal peace. The woman held out her hands. There was a bundle in them. "Take it," a voice sounded. Not in her ears, but right inside her head. Sarah held out her hands, and the woman placed the bundle in them. It was heavy, warm, alive. But when Sarah looked down, she saw that the baby wasn't wrapped in a swaddling cloth. It was wrapped in that same blue ribbon. Sarah started to unwind it to see the child's face. But the ribbon didn't end. It grew longer, unrolling in endless loops. And suddenly Sarah realized she wasn't holding one baby. The ribbon was hugging 3 tiny hearts, pulsating in unison. Thump, 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 thump. Sarah looked at the woman in panic. "I don't have the strength. I am weak. The ribbon will break." The woman put a hand on her shoulder. Her touch was hot. "The ribbon is strong, my daughter. It will hold 3. Sarah snapped her eyes open. She sat up in bed, gasping for air. Her heart was pounding somewhere in her throat. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 03:15. The room was dark, only a strip of moonlight breaking through the curtains. And then she felt it, the smell. Not the smell of sea salt, not the smell of conditioned air or hotel soap. The room smelled thickly, richly of fresh roses. The scent was so strong, as if someone had dumped 100 buds right onto the bed. "Mark?" she called in a whisper. Mark was sleeping, breathing deeply and evenly. Sarah reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. Her hand was trembling. She took a sip, trying to convince herself it was just the effects of the heat and stress. A dream, just a vivid dream, and the smell. Maybe the maid used a new air freshener? She put the glass back and turned on the nightlight, and froze. Blood drained from her face, and her hands turned cold. On the smooth surface of the wooden nightstand next to her phone and the glass of water, something lay. It couldn't be there. It was physically, logically impossible. Sarah herself, with her own hands, had tied it in a double knot on a tree branch 10 kilometers away, in a guarded reserve. But it lay here, the blue satin ribbon, clean, cool, and smelling of roses. Boston greeted them with the usual routine. 6 weeks had passed since they returned from Turkey. The blue ribbon was hidden deep in the drawer of the bedside table, wrapped in a paper napkin. Sarah tried not to look at it. She tried not to think about the smell of roses and that dream. Her mind kept telling her it was stress. It was a heat hallucination. Forget it. But her body said otherwise. First came the fatigue, such that Sarah could barely get out of bed in the morning. Then came the nausea. Not a light morning sickness, but an exhausting seasickness, rolling in waves that made the room spin. Sarah sat on the bathroom floor, pressing a cold towel to her forehead. She knew what this was. Dr. Stevenson had warned her. Early menopause. Hormonal failure caused by complete exhaustion of the body. This was the finale. Her body was finally giving up. "Sarah, we are going to the clinic." Mark's voice sounded firm. He stood in the doorway holding her coat. "No, Mark, please. I don't want to hear it again. I don't want him prescribing me hormones for old age. You are pale as death. You haven't eaten in 3 days. We are going." Now. Dr. Stevenson's office was the same as it was a month and a half ago, the same smell of alcohol, the same hum of the air conditioner, the same diplomas on the walls. The doctor looked concerned, looking at the emaciated Sarah. Probably the trip and the change of climate accelerated the hormonal collapse, he said, putting on gloves. Let's do an ultrasound to rule out cysts or tumors. With such symptoms, we must be careful. Tumors. Sarah lay down on the couch, closing her eyes. She felt like a mannequin, a broken, empty mannequin. The cold gel touched her stomach. Mark stood nearby, squeezing her hand so hard it hurt. He was afraid. He was thinking of cancer. Dr. Stevenson moved the sensor over her stomach. Usually he commented on the process. It's clear here, the endometrium is thin here. But now he was silent. A second, 10, 30. The silence in the office became dense, ringing. Sarah opened her eyes. Dr. Stevenson was frowning at the monitor. He pressed a few buttons, changed the contrast, changed the angle of the sensor. His face, usually impenetrable, turned pale. What? Mark's voice broke into a wheeze. What is it, Stephen? Is it cancer? The doctor slowly took off his glasses. His hands, the hands of a surgeon with 20 years of experience, were trembling. The machine... I think we have a software glitch, he muttered. But then he looked at the screen again and turned on the sound. Noise filled the room. It wasn't the chaotic noise of static. It was a rhythm, fast, powerful, like the sound of train wheels rushing at full speed. Thump, 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 thump. What is that sound? Whispered Sarah, trying to prop herself up on her elbows. Dr. Stevenson turned the monitor toward them. On the black background, there were no gray spots of a tumor. There were tiny, glowing dots. Life. It's a heartbeat, Sarah, the doctor said, and his voice sounded as if he didn't believe his own words. I'm pregnant? Sarah burst into tears. God, Mark, I'm pregnant. Wait, the doctor said sharply. He moved the sensor again. It's not just a heartbeat. He pointed a finger at the screen. 1, 2, 3. A silence hung in the office that was louder than any scream. Triplets, Dr. Stevenson exhaled. You have spontaneous triplets. Mark collapsed into a chair, covering his face with his hands. This is impossible, he muttered. You said 0%. You said there were no follicles. I know what I said, the doctor snapped, losing his professional composure. Medically, it is impossible. It is an anomaly. It just can't be. But the sound continued. Thump, 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 the anthem of impossible life. The joy lasted exactly 5 minutes. Then Dr. Stevenson's face became hard and serious again. He turned off the sound of the machine. Listen to me. You must understand the seriousness of the situation. Sarah wiped tears of happiness, not understanding why the doctor wasn't smiling. Sarah, your body is exhausted. Your uterus is not ready for this. Triplets are a colossal risk, even for a healthy young woman. In your case, it is a death sentence. He clasped his hands together. Hearts are beating, but there is too little space, too few resources. The probability that you will carry them even to 24 weeks is minimal. The probability that the uterus will rupture and we will lose both the children and you is over 80%. Sarah instinctively covered her stomach with her hands. What do you suggest? Selective reduction, the doctor pronounced the terrible words. We must remove 2. Leave 1, the strongest. This is the only chance to carry at least 1 healthy child and save your life. Mark raised his head. He was pale. Can she die? Yes, Mark. The risk of bleeding, preeclampsia, organ rupture is exorbitant. Mark turned to Sarah. There was animal fear in his eyes. Sarah, we can't risk you. We waited for a child. 1. The doctor is right. Let's leave 1. Please. I can't lose you. Sarah looked at her husband, then at the doctor. Logic was on their side again. Science, statistics, safety, everything screamed that she should agree. Remove 2, save 1. It is reasonable. But suddenly that voice from the dream surfaced in Sarah's head. Clear, calm, brooking no objections. She remembered the feeling of the weight of the ribbon that unrolled and unrolled, hugging 3 hearts. "The ribbon is strong, my daughter. It will hold 3. Sarah slowly got off the couch. She straightened up. She was no longer the broken woman who entered here half an hour ago. "No," she said quietly. "Sarah, be reasonable," Dr. Stevenson began. "No," her voice became harder than steel. "You said conception was impossible. But they are here, all 3. You were wrong then, doctor. You are wrong now." She looked at Mark. "I won't choose which of them lives. No one is leaving. We are taking all 3 home." Mark wanted to object, but saw her look. The same look as before the trip to Turkey, the look of a mother who has already made a decision and is ready to fight the whole world for it. "You realize this is madness?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Sarah replied, placing her hand on her stomach, where 3 tiny hearts beat an impossible rhythm. "But this is our madness." Winter in Boston that year was merciless. A blizzard raged outside the windows of the pregnancy pathology ward, burying the parking lot in snow and turning the city into white silence. But inside room 402, it was hot with tension. Sarah had spent the last 2 months here, complete bed rest, IVs, the constant beeping of monitors. Her belly had grown to incredible proportions. The skin stretched so tight it looked transparent. Mark was torn between the architectural firm and the hospital. He lost weight. Dark circles settled under his eyes. He feared every phone call. 24 weeks. This is the cursed boundary. Doctors call it the gray zone. If babies are born now, it is a 50% chance of survival and almost a 90% chance of severe disability, blindness, cerebral palsy, lung problems. It happened on Tuesday at 02:45 a.m. Sarah woke up not from a sound, but from a sensation. Moisture. Warm, sticky moisture. She threw back the blanket and screamed. The snow-white hospital sheets were rapidly turning bright scarlet. Within 3 minutes, the room was filled with people. Code blue. Bleeding. Prep the OR. The light of the lamps hurt her eyes. Someone's hands were placing new catheters. Someone was shouting orders. Dr. Stevenson ran into the room, buttoning his coat on the way. He took one look at the sheets, then at the monitor. The sound in the room changed. The rhythmic thump-thump turned into the chaotic, erratic wail of a siren. "Fetus B heart rate dropping," the nurse shouted. 60 beats. 50. Dr. Stevenson grabbed the sensor. Massive placental abruption. His voice was harsh as a whip crack. "We are losing them. Mark, listen to me." Mark stood against the wall, white as chalk. "We have to cut now, immediately. If we don't get them out in 10 minutes, baby B will die, and then the rest. And Sarah is losing too much blood." Mark nodded. He couldn't speak. He just looked at the wife he loved more than life and realized this was the end. 24 weeks. Triplets. Bleeding. There was no chance. The gurney with Sarah was already being wheeled to the doors. "Mark!" Sarah suddenly screamed. Her voice was weak, but it had that same steel. "The ribbon!" "Mark, where is the ribbon?" Nurses tried to hold her down. "Ma'am, calm down. You can't move. Bring me the ribbon," she screamed, looking at her husband with wild eyes. "The one! From the suitcase!" Mark froze. It was madness. What ribbon when she is dying? But he remembered that day at the hotel, the smell of roses, and how the ribbon appeared on the nightstand against the laws of physics. He rushed to the bag of things they had brought to the hospital just in case. He dumped the contents onto the floor. Robe, slippers, books, and there it was, the blue satin ribbon. It lay on top of everything, as if waiting. Mark grabbed it and ran after the gurney, which was already being wheeled into the elevator. "Here." He put the ribbon into Sarah's bloodied hand. "I'm here, honey." They were the only ones in the elevator, along with Dr. Stevenson and 2 nurses. Sarah squeezed the ribbon so hard her fingers turned white. She didn't examine it. She simply, with trembling movements, wound it around her left wrist. A turn, another turn, a knot. "The ribbon is strong. It will hold 3. And the second the knot tightened, the elevator filled with a smell. It wasn't the smell of blood, not the smell of iodine, and not the smell of fear. Fresh, sweet, thick roses. The scent was so intense that Dr. Stevenson stopped breathing for a second and looked around as if looking for the source. "Where is that smell coming from?" the nurse asked, wrinkling her nose. Beep. The monitor connected to Sarah's stomach made a long, drawn-out sound. Mark stopped breathing. Did her heart stop? But then the sound changed. Thump, 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 thump. The rhythm returned, clear, strong, 140 beats per minute. Then a second rhythm. Then a third. The elevator doors opened on the operating floor. A team of surgeons was already waiting in masks and gloves. "Readiness number 1, shouted the anesthesiologist. "Status?" Dr. Stevenson looked at the portable monitor. He looked at Sarah, who lay with her eyes closed, clutching the blue ribbon. The bleeding on the sheets had stopped. "Doctor?" They hurried him. Stevenson raised his hand. "Stop." "What do you mean, stop? We have an abruption." "No," Stevenson whispered, looking at Sarah's blood pressure readings, which had miraculously returned to normal. "Not anymore." He grabbed the portable ultrasound machine. With a trembling hand, he moved it over her stomach. On the screen, the placenta was intact. The hematoma that a minute ago threatened to kill the children had disappeared as if erased by an eraser. Silence hung in the operating room. Doctors looked at each other. Nurses looked at the monitors. And the smell of roses grew stronger, filling the sterile space with the aroma of an impossible miracle. "Take her back to the ward." Dr. Stevenson's voice trembled. "Immediately." "But doctor—" "The protocol." "To hell with the protocol," he barked. "Don't you see? They are stable, all 3. Morning came clear and cold. The storm had subsided. Sarah slept, her breathing even. On her wrist, standing out brightly against her pale skin, was tied a blue satin ribbon. Mark sat nearby, holding her hand. He was afraid to move. The door opened quietly. Dr. Stevenson entered. He didn't bring a chart. He didn't bring a stethoscope. He just walked in, sat on the chair opposite, and looked at Sarah for a long time. Then he shifted his gaze to the ribbon. "I am an atheist, Mark," he said quietly. "I believe in cells, in blood flow, and in surgical steel. I have worked in obstetrics for 25 years. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Placental abruption does not heal in 30 seconds in an elevator. It is medically impossible. Tissues do not regenerate at the snap of a finger." Mark nodded. "I know." "Then explain to me," the doctor pointed at the ribbon, "what is that?" Mark smiled a weak, tired smile. "It's just an old ribbon from a wedding bouquet, doctor, and a promise made by one mother to another." The pregnancy continued. 25 weeks, 28 weeks, 32 weeks. Doctors walked around room 402 on tiptoes as if afraid to scare away the miracle that lived there, guarded by the scent of roses and blue satin. 34 weeks. In the world of obstetrics, this is considered the gold standard for triplets, the home stretch. Spring had come to Boston, melting the snowdrifts, and sunlight flooded the room where Sarah was preparing for the most important day of her life. Operating room number 4 resembled a disturbed hive. It was crowded. 3 resuscitation teams, 1 for each child, neonatologists, nurses, anesthesiologists, about 15 people in all. Mark, dressed in a funny blue surgical suit and cap, sat at the head of the bed, holding Sarah's hand. On Sarah's left wrist, right under the plastic patient ID bracelet, was tied the frayed blue ribbon. It had darkened with time, the edges were frayed, but the knot was still just as tight. Dr. Stevenson entered, raising his hands in sterile gloves. "All right, team, let's meet these impossible triplets." A screen blocked the view, but the sounds were frighteningly distinct. The clatter of instruments, the beep of the monitor, short commands, scalpel, clamp, suction. Mark looked into Sarah's eyes. "How are you?" "I'm ready," she whispered. "They are ready. I see the first one." Dr. Stevenson's voice cut through the tension. "Head presentation. Go to Daddy." A second. And then the most beautiful sound in the world, a loud, indignant cry. "Girl." So 9:14. It was Eva, pink, screaming, alive. Second one coming. Stevenson worked quickly. Breech presentation. Careful. Another splash. And again a cry, deeper, demanding. "Boy." 09:16. "Noah." Sarah cried, laughing. 2 out of 3, 2 healthy cries. And the last one. Our little Mia. Doctors bent over the operating field. Mark waited. Sarah waited. The whole room waited for the third cry. But there was none. Silence hung in the operating room, the kind that makes blood run cold. "She's not breathing." The neonatologist's voice was frighteningly calm. The cord was wrapped around. Code blue for baby C. The baby was quickly passed to the resuscitation table. Sarah tried to sit up, but the straps held her down. Why is she silent? Mark? Mark looked at the table in the corner where doctors were working their magic over a tiny bluish body. "Stimulation! Oxygen! Come on, little one, breathe!" 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Silence. Sarah closed her eyes. Her fingers dug into the blue ribbon on her wrist. She didn't pray with words. She prayed with that same heaviness she felt in the dream. "You promised. You said the ribbon would hold 3. Don't let go of her. Don't you dare let go of her." Heart rate dropping. 60 beats. Adrenaline? Too early. Ventilate again. 30 seconds. It is an eternity when you are waiting for your child to take a breath. Dr. Stevenson froze over the operating table, watching the resuscitation team. Even he stopped breathing. And suddenly, the operating room smelled again, barely perceptible, but distinct. Fresh roses. The smell passed in a wave from Sarah's table to the resuscitation corner, and in that same second, a sound was heard, a weak, hoarse cough. And then a thin, piercing squeak that quickly grew into a full-blown cry. Breath sounds present, pinkening up. "Damn it, she's back." Mark lowered his head onto Sarah's chest and sobbed. Sarah exhaled, feeling the tension leave her body along with the tears. All 3, all here. An hour later, when the children were washed and examined, Mark was allowed into the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, where they lay in incubators. They were small but strong, Eva, Noah, and Mia. And the head nurse, a woman with 30 years of experience, beckoned Mark with a strange gesture. "Mr. Thompson, come here. You have to see this." She gently took Eva's tiny hand. "Look." On the infant's left wrist, on the delicate, translucent skin, a mark was visible. A thin, barely noticeable bluish line encircling the wrist, like a trace from a ribbon worn for a very long time. Mark frowned. Were the bracelets too tight? "We haven't put bracelets on yet, sir," the nurse said quietly. "We just admitted them." She walked over to Noah's incubator, the same mark on the left arm, and on Mia, a thin, perfect ring-shaped mark. "It looks like an imprint," the nurse whispered, looking at Mark with superstitious horror. Mark remembered Sarah's dream. The ribbon hugged 3 tiny hearts. He ran a finger over the mark on his son's arm. The skin was smooth. The mark was inside, under the skin, like a memory of what held them together all these months. "They are fading," the nurse noted. "Look, they are already paling." And indeed, right before their eyes, the bluish lines dissolved, leaving the skin clear, as if their job was done, and now they could leave. In the evening, Dr. Stevenson came into the recovery room to see Sarah. He looked tired, a man whose worldview had cracked. He sat on the edge of the chair, twirling his pen in his hands. "They are stable," he said, breathing on their own. "Weight is excellent for triplets. It is a success." "Thank you, doctor," Sarah smiled. She looked glowing, despite the pain after the surgery. Stevenson shook his head. "Don't thank me, Sarah. I made the incision. I put in the stitches. That is my job." He looked at the nightstand where the rolled-up blue ribbon lay. Now it looked like just a piece of old fabric. But what happened in the operating room, how Mia came back, and how they survived it all after that night at 24 weeks. He stood up and straightened his coat. Medicine was powerless here. I just stood by and watched a miracle happen. It was beyond my competence. He headed for the door but stopped, holding the handle. And, by the way, he added, without turning around, I never liked the smell of roses. I'm allergic to them. But today, in the operating room, it was the best smell I have ever smelled. 7 years have passed. If you walk past the Thompson house in a Boston suburb on a sunny Saturday afternoon, you will hear a noise. It is not the noise of arguments or despair that once reigned here. It is the sound of pure, unstoppable life. In the backyard, among scattered bicycles and balls, 3 children are running. Eva, the leader with eternally messy hair, commands an expedition to the far fence. Noah, serious and thoughtful, builds a complex structure out of branches. And Mia, the smallest but the loudest, laughs trying to catch a butterfly. They are absolutely healthy. No lung problems, no CP, no traces of being born 6 weeks premature after a deadly pregnancy. Doctors call them a medical phenomenon. Sarah and Mark simply call them Ava, Noah, and Mia. Sarah sat on the porch holding a cup of tea. She looked at the children, and wrinkles gathered at the corners of her eyes, traces of smiles, not tears. Mark came out of the house carrying a small wooden box. He sat down next to her, placing a hand on her knee. "Do you remember the date?" he asked. "Of course. Today is exactly 8 years since we flew to Ephesus." Mark opened the box. Inside, on a velvet lining, it lay, the blue satin ribbon. It no longer looked new. The fabric was faded in places. There were stains that didn't wash out after that night in the ICU. But it was intact. The knot Sarah had tied on the tree and then retied in the elevator still held. Mark gently touched the fabric. "You know, I never told you this," he said quietly, watching the children play. "About that night at the hotel." Sarah turned to him. "What are you talking about?" Mark took a deep breath. "That night you had the dream. I wasn't sleeping when you woke up. I woke up a second before you. From the smell." Sarah froze. I opened my eyes and saw the nightstand. It was empty, Sarah. And then the air just thickened, as if someone invisible put a hand on the table. And the ribbon appeared, out of nowhere, just materialized out of light and the smell of roses. Mark's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared. I am an architect. I know how the world works. Things don't appear out of thin air. So I kept quiet. I thought I was going crazy. But when I saw those marks on the children's wrists in the hospital, I understood. He took Sarah's hand and kissed her palm. "You believed when I gave up. You believed for both of us." Sarah smiled and took the ribbon out of the box. She brought it to her face. 8 years had passed. The ribbon had lain in hospitals, in suitcases, in closets. But even now, after all this time, a subtle, unmistakable scent emanated from it. The smell of fresh roses. Sometimes science puts a period. It says, impossible, infertility, the end. But faith is what takes the pen and turns that period into a comma. Dr. Stevenson still sends them cards for Christmas. In the last one he wrote, "I am still looking for a scientific explanation in medical journals, but every time I look at a photo of your triplets, I realize that some answers should not be sought in books, but in the sky." Sarah looked at her children. The ribbon really turned out to be strong. It held them all, and she knew that even when the ribbon decays and crumbles into dust, that invisible thread that bound them that night in Ephesus will remain forever. Because miracles happen not only to the chosen or saints, they happen to ordinary people who, in the darkest moment of their lives, find the courage to whisper, "Help." And the answer always comes, sometimes in the form of a doctor, sometimes in the form of luck, and sometimes in the form of an old blue ribbon smelling of roses. If you want to hear more stories like this, click the subscribe button and become part of our community. Share this story with someone who needs a miracle right now.